I recently faced my own worst nightmare. The HOA president called a gas leak emergency on my cabin while I was away. And her excuse? She said it couldn't wait. It had to be done now. Funny thing is, the person who was inside was someone trying to leave me with more than just a bill. But let me start from the beginning. The air coming off Pine Lake still had a bit of a chill to it, even for late spring. It smelled clean, like wet stone and pine needles. I killed the engine of my truck and just sat there for a minute, letting the silence wash over me. For the past 6 weeks, my world had been the rhythmic beep of monitors, the controlled chaos of an operating room, and the low, constant hum of a field hospital generator. Coming home was like surfacing for air after being underwater for too long. My cabin wasn't big or fancy, just solid logs and a good roof, tucked away where the trees were thickest. It was the quietest place I knew. My brother, Ethan, always joked that I collected quiet the way other people collected stamps. After the places I'd been, he wasn't wrong. I grabbed my duffel bag from the passenger seat, swung the truck door shut, and breathed in deep. Home. The word itself felt like a release of tension in my shoulders. That's when I saw her. Cynthia Hayes, standing on the edge of my lawn like a flamingo in a pantsuit, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice cut through the peace and quiet like a shard of glass. She was all sharp angles and expensive perfume, the self-appointed queen of the Pine Lake Homeowners Association. Yes, an intruder, she said, her voice dripping with manufactured panic. He just pulled up in a dusty old truck. It's him, the owner. But he's not supposed to be here. He looks agitated. I stopped, my boots crunching on the gravel driveway. Agitated? I felt about as agitated as a hibernating bear. I was tired. I was hungry. And I was looking forward to a hot shower and 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. I gave her a small, non-committal wave. She ignored it, turning her back to me, raising her voice for dramatic effect. I'm very frightened. He's approaching now. Please hurry. I sighed. This was Cynthia's brand. She sold safety. Or rather, she sold the fear that made people buy her version of safety. It came with monthly fees, special assessments, and a list of rules longer than my arm. I'd been a surgeon in war zones. I knew what real fear looked like. This wasn't it. This was theater. I walked past her, heading for my front porch. Afternoon, Cynthia, I said, my voice flat. She spun around, her eyes wide with what was supposed to be alarm, but looked more like satisfaction. Dr. Monroe, you're back early. Your property has been flagged for a security check. I told you not to come here until it was cleared. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. I don't recall you telling me anything, Cynthia. And since I own the property, I think I'm allowed to be on it. A sheriff's cruiser, lights off, rolled slowly up the driveway. A young deputy I didn't recognize stepped out. He looked from Cynthia's crisp corporate attire to my rumpled travel clothes and dusty truck. He had that look of someone who knew his afternoon was about to get complicated. Ma'am, sir, we got a call about a possible intruder. Cynthia pointed a perfectly manicured finger at me. That's him, officer. He's trespassing. The deputy looked at me. Sir, is this your property? I nodded. Dr. Nathan Monroe. Bought it 2 years ago. Just got back from a medical mission overseas. I have my ID right here. I pulled out my wallet. The deputy took it, glanced at the ID, and then back at the cabin. He looked tired. Everything seems to be in order, ma'am. Cynthia wasn't having it. But the security alert. I am the head of the Community Safety Board. We had a report of a gas leak. The property was supposed to be vacant for emergency servicing. Gas leak. That was new. My cabin doesn't have a natural gas line, just electric and a propane tank I'd already shut off. I looked from her smug face to the board deputy, and a familiar feeling settled in my gut. It was the same feeling I got before, a complex surgeria sense of things not lining up, of a hidden problem just beneath the surface. I'd learned to trust that feeling. It had saved lives. Here, it was probably just going to save me a headache, but it was strong. There's no gas leak, Cynthia, I said, my voice calm. And I didn't get any notice about an emergency service. It was a last-minute emergency. We have to be proactive, she insisted, her voice rising. For the good of the community. The deputy handed my ID back. Well, he lives here. There's no trespassing. He gave her a polite but firm look. Unless there's an actual crime, I think we're done here. He got back in his car and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and an awkward silence. I should have checked my door cam right then. I didn't. That was my mistake. Cynthia glared at me, her mask of concern replaced by pure annoyance. This is not over, doctor. You can't just ignore community safety protocols. She turned and marched back toward her own, much larger cabin down the shore. I watched her go, then unlocked my front door. The air inside was cool and still. It smelled like cedar and dust. Everything was exactly as I had left it. But Cynthia's words echoed in my head. Emergency servicing. Gas leak. It made no sense. It was a lie, but it was a specific lie. Why that one? I dropped my bag by the door and walked through the familiar rooms. Nothing was out of place. The book I'd been reading was still face down on the nightstand. A coffee cup was in the sink. Yet, the feeling persisted. Something was wrong. I thought about the security camera I had installed by the front door. It was a simple motion-activated thing, mostly for catching porch pirates or curious raccoons. I hadn't even checked it while I was away. Pulling out my phone, I opened the app. A long list of motion alerts filled the screen, far more than usual. Most were from birds or falling leaves. But then I saw it. An alert from yesterday afternoon. The thumbnail showed a man in a gray uniform standing on my porch. He wasn't a raccoon. My heart rate, usually steady as a metronome, picked up just a little. I tapped on the video file, a cold knot forming in my stomach. The lie about a gas leak suddenly felt a lot more important, and I had a terrible feeling I was about to find out why. The video loaded, the image a little grainy but clear enough. A white, windowless van was parked where my truck now sat. It had no company logo, just a generic utility services sticker peeling at the edges. A man got out. He was medium height, thick-set, wearing a gray jumpsuit and a baseball cap pulled down low. He carried a metal clipboard and a toolbox. He walked up to my porch with a sense of purpose, like he belonged there. He didn't knock. He didn't ring the bell. He just stood there for a moment, looking around, checking the tree line. It was the look of a man making sure he wasn't being watched. My own training, the little bits of situational awareness you pick up in unstable places, kicked in. I watched him not as a homeowner, but as an analyst. His posture was too tense for a routine service call. He held the toolbox unnaturally, like he wasn't used to its weight or contents. He was an actor, and not a very good one. He pulled a key from his pocket, not a key from a large ring like a maintenance guy would have, but a single, shiny new key. He slid it into my lock. It turned. Later, I'd see a fresh copy tagged 17 in their key box. I hadn't rekeyed when I bought the place. That was on me. The door swung open. My door. He'd used a key to open my locked door. I felt a surge of cold anger. This wasn't a service call. This was a break-in, disguised as something official. I kept watching, my thumb hovering over the timeline scrubber. The man stepped inside, leaving the door slightly ajar. The camera's field of view was limited to the porch and a sliver of the hallway inside. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then I saw his arm reappear. He was reaching for something outside the camera's view. A moment later, I saw what he was doing. He was near the floor, fiddling with the air intake vent for the furnace. I zoomed in. He had a small tool in his hand and was feeding a thin black wire into the ductwork. It wasn't a repair. It was an installation. A surgeon's eye for detail is a hard habit to break. I could see the precise, deliberate movements of his fingers. He wasn't checking for a leak. He was planting something. A bug? A camera? It didn't matter. He was violating my home, my quiet place, under the absurdly false pretense of safety. The word Cynthia had used, safety. This was her doing. It had to be. The fake gas leak story was the cover. This man was her agent. But why? What could she possibly want from me? I'm a surgeon. I fix people. I go away for a few months. I come home to be left alone. I'm not interesting. I don't have secrets. My brother, Ethan, had warned me about aggressive HOAs when I bought the place. He's a lawyer, and he sees the worst of people fighting over the dumbest things. He told me to read every bylaw, to document everything. A little bit of power, he'd said, makes people do crazy things. I thought he was being overly dramatic. Now, I wasn't so sure. I scanned through the rest of the footage. The man was inside for about 15 minutes. He came back out, closed the door, and locked it behind him. He walked back to the van, put his toolbox in the back, and drove away. The whole operation was smooth, practiced. It wasn't the first time he'd done this. A new thought struck me, colder and sharper than the first. The video was from yesterday. The man was long gone. But what if he wasn't? What if Cynthia's panicked 911 call wasn't just theater to harass me? What if it was a signal, a warning to someone that I had come home unexpectedly, interrupting their work? What if there was a second man, another utility worker, still inside my house? The silence of the cabin, which had been so comforting just minutes before, now felt heavy and threatening. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, sounded like a footstep. My world-weary sighed. The part of me that had seen the worst of human nature in field hospitals kicked into high gear. People under pressure are predictable. An operative caught by surprise has two options: run or fight. I didn't know which one this man would choose. My eyes scanned the room. The fireplace poker was leaning against the hearth. Heavy, solid iron. Not a weapon, but it would do. I picked it up, the weight of it feeling unfamiliar but necessary in my hand. My movements became methodical, the way they did in the operating room. One step at a time. Clear the space. Assess the situation. Don't rush. I started with the main living area, then the kitchen. Nothing. Every cupboard was closed, every chair in its place. The whole time, my ears were straining, listening for the one sound that didn't belong. A breath, a shuffle, a cough. The house was small. There weren't many places to hide. The hallway leading to the bedroom and bathroom was the only area left. The floorboards there were old and creaked if you put your weight in the wrong spot. I moved slowly, keeping my back to the wall, my grip tight on the poker. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, just as I'd left it. I nudged it open with my foot. The room was empty. The bed was unmade. My bag was still on the floor where I had dropped it. That left the bathroom and a small linen closet. The closet door was closed. I reached for the handle, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I pulled the door open. Linens, towels, nothing else. A wave of relief washed over me, and I almost let myself relax. But then I saw it. The scuff mark on the wooden floor right in front of the closet. A dark, fresh streak that wasn't there when I left. Someone had been here recently, and as I turned, my eyes fell on the hallway ceiling. There, right above the door, was the attic access panel, and it was crooked, shifted just an inch to the left. He wasn't gone. He was above me. My blood ran cold. The thought of someone hiding in the cramped, dark space above my head sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. My mind, trained for crisis, started working through the options. Yell? No. That would just confirm I knew he was there. Call the police? By the time they arrived, he could be long gone. I had to act now. He had the advantage of surprise, but I had the advantage of knowing he was there. I backed away from the attic panel slowly, deliberately, keeping my eyes fixed on it. I didn't want to give any indication that I'd seen it. I continued my search, opening and closing the bathroom door, making it look like I was still clearing the rooms. I needed to get him out of the attic and into the open. The best way to do that was to make him think I was leaving. I walked back to the front of the cabin, my steps heavy and loud. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, jingling them noisily. Guess I'm just paranoid, I said out loud to the empty room, my voice sounding fake even to my own ears. I opened the front door, stepped out onto the porch, and then closed the door firmly behind me. I left the knob horizontal so it looked set, but I didn't throw the deadbolt. The door just sat on the latch. I stood on the porch for a moment, listening. Nothing. I walked down the steps and over to my truck, opened the driver's side door, and then slammed it shut. Then I crouched down behind the front fender, out of sight of the windows, and waited. My heart was a drum against my ribs. It was a gamble. If he was smart, he'd stay put. But if he was scared, if he thought his cover was blown and I was coming back with the cops, he would try to run. I counted the seconds. 10, 20, 30. Just as I was starting to think I'd miscalculated, I heard it. A faint scraping sound from inside the house. The attic panel. A moment later, the back door of the cabin, which led out to the woods and the lake, creaked open. I peered around the edge of my truck. A man in a dark hoodie and jeans slipped out of the house. He was younger than the guy from the video, wiry and quick. He scanned the yard, his eyes darting back and forth. He didn't see me. He took off at a sprint, not toward the road, but into the thick stand of pine trees that separated my property from the lake. I was after him in a second. The iron poker was gone, left inside, but it didn't matter. Running was something I understood. The forest floor was a carpet of damp pine needles, muffling our footsteps. He was fast, weaving through the trees like he knew the terrain. But I knew it better. This was my escape, my place to decompress. I knew every route, every dip in the ground. He was running on pure panic. I was running with purpose. The air burned in my lungs. Branches whipped at my face. I could see the glint of the lake through the trees ahead. He was heading for the dock. Maybe he had a boat stashed there. Or maybe he just thought he could get away. He burst out of the woods and onto the narrow wooden planks of the dock. His sneakers slipped on a patch of wet moss, and he stumbled, giving me the opening I needed. I lunged, wrapping my arms around his waist in a low tackle. We went down hard. The impact knocked the wind out of both of us. The world was a chaotic mess of splintered wood, grunts, and the cold spray of lake water. He was stronger than he looked, all wiry muscle and desperation. He squirmed, trying to throw me off, his elbow catching me squarely in the jaw. My head snapped back, and for a second, the world went blurry. He scrambled to his feet, but I grabbed his ankle, holding on with everything I had. He kicked back, his boot connecting with my shoulder, but I didn't let go. I wasn't trying to hurt him. In the OR, you learn to be precise, to use just enough force and no more. I twisted his ankle, using his own momentum against him. He cried out and fell again, this time half on the dock, half in the shallow water. I was on him instantly, pinning him down, one hand on his chest, the other grabbing his wrists. He struggled, but his fight was gone, replaced by a panicked, sputtering fear. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice a low growl. "Who sent you?" He just shook his head, water dripping from his hair into his eyes. "I don't know anything, man. I was just supposed to run a wire." "Who paid you?" I pressed, leaning my weight on him. That's when I heard the sound of an approaching car, and then the familiar chirp of a police radio. A car door slammed. Dispatch had kept a unit nearby after the first call. "Nate? Dr. Monroe?" Dispatch had my name from Cynthia's earlier 911 call. It was a woman's voice, calm, authoritative. I looked up. A sheriff's deputy was standing at the edge of the woods, her hand resting on her sidearm. She was older than the first deputy, with sharp, intelligent eyes that took in the whole scene in a single glance. "Deputy Ramirez," she said. "Someone want to tell me what's going on here?" I was still breathing hard, my adrenaline slowly starting to recede. I looked down at the shivering man pinned beneath me, then back at the deputy. I said, my voice hoarse. "This man was in my attic, and I have a feeling his van is parked somewhere nearby." Deputy Ramirez didn't even blink. She just nodded, her gaze shifting to the man on the dock. It was a look I recognized. It was the look of someone who had just found the first piece of a very large, very complicated puzzle, and she was ready to start putting it together. Deputy Ramirez was the kind of person who radiated competence. She moved with an economy of motion. Her questions were sharp and to the point, and she listened to the answers. While another officer cuffed the man from my attic, whose name turned out to be Jake, Ramirez walked with me back toward the house. I gave her the short version. Coming home early, Cynthia's bizarre 911 call, the door cam footage of the first man, and finding the second one in my attic. She took it all in without interruption, her expression unreadable. "Cynthia Hayes," she said, the name tasting like something sour. "She keeps our dispatchers busy." We found the white van parked in a small wooded pull-off about a quarter-mile down the road, well hidden from passing cars. It was exactly the one from my video. Jake, now sitting in the back of a patrol car, refused to say a word, but the van was another story. It was a treasure trove. Ramirez got a warrant to search it. A standing on-call judge had already greenlit quick warrants for a string of lake break-ins. This fit the pattern. While we waited, my neighbor George wandered over. George was a retired park ranger, a man who seemed to be made of leather and quiet wisdom. He had a dog named Buddy who was perpetually chasing squirrels. "Heard a commotion, Nate," he said, peering at the police cars. "Everything all right? That HOA queen finally declare war?" I managed a tired smile. "Something like that." "Knew she was trouble," he grumbled, pulling a stray leaf from his white beard. "Acts like she owns the lake. Told me my bird feeder was attracting undesirable elements. I told her the jays are citizens, too." Ramirez returned with the warrant in hand. The back of the van was locked up tight. An officer jimmied the door, and it swung open to reveal a mobile command center for a very specific kind of business. He showed the signed warrant before he popped the latch. It was meticulously organized. On one wall, tools were clipped in neat rows. Not the tools of a gas man or an electrician, but delicate electronics equipment, signal boosters, soldering irons, spools of whisper-thin wire. On a workbench, there were several small black plastic squares. I picked one up. It was a listening device, a microphone small enough to hide almost anywhere. It was exactly like the one I'd imagined being fed into my air vents. There was a stack of clipboards on a small shelf. Ramirez picked one up. The top sheet was a work order for my address. The reason for the visit was listed as mandatory emergency gas safety inspection. The work order was signed by Cynthia Hayes, president of Pine Lake Safety Initiative. Pine Lake Safety Initiative, Ramirez read out loud, her voice laced with irony. That's what she calls her new program. She flipped through the other work orders. There were dozens of them, one for nearly every cabin in the community that wasn't owned by one of Cynthia's close friends. Beneath the clipboards was a heavy-duty key box. Inside was a collection of master keys, each one tagged with a cabin number. My number, 17, was on a key that looked brand new. Cynthia hadn't just faked a work order. She had a key to my house. She had keys to everyone's houses. The methodical, almost clinical part of my brain took over again. This was a systematic invasion of privacy on a massive scale. But the question remained, why? The answer was in a locked metal file box under the workbench. The officer had to use a crowbar to get it open. Inside were files, one for each targeted property. I watched over Ramirez's shoulder as she opened the one with my name on it. It contained a copy of my property records, my tax information, and even a printout of my credit report. Tucked in the back was a document titled Projected Compliance Schedule. It was a spreadsheet. It listed a series of escalating safety violations and the associated fees. It started small, a $50 fine for improper vegetation clearance. Then it grew, a $200 fee for a mandatory deck integrity test, a $500 charge for a septic system evaluation. The final entry, scheduled for 3 months from now, was a $2,000 mandatory security system upgrade to be installed by a company called Hayes Secure Homes, which, of course, was owned by Cynthia. It's a squeeze play, Ramirez said, her voice grim. She finds a homeowner, maybe someone on a fixed income or someone who's away a lot like you. She uses these fake inspections to plant listening devices to find out about their financial situation. Then she buries them in fees and fines until they can't afford to stay. Then her company swoops in and buys the property for pennies on the dollar. It was a brilliant, predatory scheme, all disguised as community safety. The bugs weren't for blackmail. They were for market research. George, who had been watching quietly, let out a low whistle. That woman could skin a flea for its hide and sell the tallow. He was right. Cynthia wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was a predator, and this quiet lakeside community was her hunting ground. We had one of her guys in cuffs, but we still needed to connect it all directly to Cynthia. The work orders had her name on them, but she could claim her signature was forged. We needed something more. Ramirez closed the van doors. She's smart, the deputy said. She's insulated herself. We have her employees, but they'll lawyer up. Getting her to confess will be next to impossible. I thought about Cynthia's perfectly polished image, her confident speeches about safety and community. She thrived in the public eye, so maybe that's where we had to fight her. Not in a courtroom, not yet, but in the one place where she felt most powerful. There's an HOA meeting tomorrow night, I said, the idea forming in my mind. She'll be there. She'll have to address the rumors about the police presence. Ramirez looked at me, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. You want to confront her in public? No, I said, picking up one of the small black listening devices from the workbench. I want to give a little presentation on home security. The community hall was a log building that smelled of old coffee and wood polish. It was packed. Word had spread about the police cars at my cabin, and the air was thick with nervous chatter. I saw people who had lived here for decades, people who had built their homes with their own hands, all looking worried. They were good people who just wanted to be left alone, and Cynthia Hayes had been preying on that instinct. I found a seat in the back row next to George. Deputy Ramirez was there, too, standing against the back wall, out of uniform. She was just an observer tonight, but her presence was a quiet statement. Cynthia stood at the podium at the front of the room, looking radiant. She wore a cream-colored suit and a smile that was both dazzling and predatory. She projected an aura of complete control. She tapped the microphone, and the room fell silent. Good evening, everyone, she began, her voice smooth as silk. I know there have been some unsettling rumors today, and I want to address them directly. As part of our new Pine Lake Safety Initiative, we have been conducting proactive security checks on properties that have been identified as high risk. She paused, letting the words sink in. Unfortunately, there was a misunderstanding today involving one of our newer residents, Dr. Monroe. It seems he was not aware of the scheduled emergency maintenance. She gave me a condescending smile. A few people turned to look at me. I just sat there, my face impassive. I want to assure you, she continued, that everything is under control. The sheriff's department was called, a report was filed, and the matter is closed. Our initiative is working. We are making this community safer, one home at a time. It was a masterful performance. She twisted the narrative, turning her criminal enterprise into a public service and painting me as an uncooperative outsider. She was counting on the fact that no one would dare challenge her. It was time to change that. I stood up. I have a question, Cynthia. A murmur went through the crowd. People didn't ask Cynthia questions. They listened to her decrees. Her smile tightened. Dr. Monroe, this isn't really the forum for individual complaints. It's not a complaint, I said, my voice carrying easily in the quiet room. I started walking toward the front. It's more of a product demonstration. You see, I'm very interested in this new safety initiative, especially the advanced technology your teams are using. I reached the front of the room and stood beside the podium. I held up the small black listening device we'd found in the van. It was logged into evidence an hour ago. It was tiny, resting in the palm of my hand. For example, I said, we pulled this from their van after my emergency maintenance. Can you tell us what it is? Cynthia's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of panic before the mask slammed back into place. It's a standard moisture detector, she said smoothly, to detect plumbing leaks before they become a major problem. It's part of the premium safety package. The lie was so quick, so plausible. I could see some people in the audience nodding, ready to believe her. A moisture detector, I repeated, turning the device over in my hand. That's fascinating, because it looks an awful lot like a battery-powered, long-range audio transmitter. A bud. The word hung in the air. Bug. The murmuring in the crowd grew louder. Cynthia laughed, a brittle, sharp sound. Doctor, I think your time in those stressful environments has made you a bit paranoid. That is a state-of-the-art piece of home protection equipment. Then you won't mind if I show everyone how it works? I said. I set my phone down and pulled a pocket RF receiver with a speaker from my coat. I'd spent the afternoon with a friend from my Army days who knew about this stuff. He'd shown me how to tune a small RF receiver to the device's frequency. I clicked the receiver on and spun the dial. Static, then my own breath through its tiny speaker. I held the device close and spoke. Testing. 1, 2, 3. My voice came out of the receiver, loud and clear. It was undeniable. It wasn't a moisture detector. It was exactly what I said it was, a listening device. I held it up for everyone to see. This is what Cynthia Hayes' safety initiative is all about, I said, my voice steady and clear. It's about putting these in your homes, in your walls, in your bedrooms, listening to your private conversations, not to keep you safe from burglars, but to find out if you're financially vulnerable so she can fine and fee you until you're forced to sell your home to her. An uproar erupted in the hall. People were on their feet, shouting, pointing at Cynthia. Her face had gone pale. The confident smile was gone, replaced by a snarl of pure fury. She grabbed the microphone. This is an outrage. He's a disgruntled resident making wild accusations. This meeting is over. She was losing control, and she knew it. She tried to push past me, but the crowd was surging forward, demanding answers. It was George who spoke up, his deep voice cutting through the noise. I think we'd all like to hear an explanation, Cynthia. All eyes were on her. The Queen was cornered in her own court. She looked at the angry faces of her neighbors, the people she had been systematically targeting. She looked at me, her eyes filled with hate. Then she looked at Deputy Ramirez, who was now walking slowly toward the front of the room. Cynthia's face hardened into a mask of defiance. There will be an official inquiry, she spat, and I will be fully exonerated. In the meantime, as a matter of public safety, Dr. Monroe's property is scheduled for a full, mandatory structural inspection tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. His dock appears to be in violation of several community codes. It was a direct threat, a blatant act of retaliation in front of the entire community. She was doubling down, using the very system she'd created to punish me for exposing her. The room fell silent again, shocked by her audacity. She pushed her way through the stunned crowd and stormed out of the hall. The battle was out in the open now, and Cynthia had just made it clear she had no intention of backing down. She was going to try to break me, and she was going to use the full power of her corrupt system to do it. The next morning, a third-party inspector contracted by the county pulled up promptly at 9 a.m. He had a sour face and a clipboard, the universal uniform of someone who enjoys wielding minor authority. His name was Mr. Peterson, and he walked with the self-important air of a man who was very certain he was going to find a problem. George was already on my porch, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He'd seen the county vehicle pull up. Reinforcements have arrived, he announced, handing me a mug. Figured you might need some moral support and coffee. Thanks, George, I said, taking a sip. The coffee was black and strong, just how I liked it. Peterson ignored us completely. He didn't even look at the cabin. He marched straight past the house, down the path, and onto my dock, his eyes scanning every board, every post. I built that dock myself with my brother, Ethan, the summer after I bought the place. It was solid. We'd used galvanized steel bolts and pressure-treated lumber. It was over-engineered to withstand a hurricane, let alone the gentle lapping of Pine Lake. Peterson spent 20 minutes on the dock. He knelt. He peered. He tapped boards with the end of his pen. Finally, he stood up, a triumphant smirk on his face. "This is a serious violation," he declared, his voice full of feigned gravity. He pointed to one of the bolts that secured the dock to the concrete footing on the shore. "This bolt is loose by at least a 1/16 of an inch. It compromises the shoreline footing and egress. That triggers a safety hold." I walked over and looked. The bolt was perfectly tight. I knew it was. I'd checked them all myself at the beginning of the season. "That bolt is not loose," I said calmly. I snapped a close-up photo with a timestamp. He waved it off. He scoffed. "I'm the inspector. I say it's loose. The entire structure is unsafe. Under our county's shoreline safety ordinance, any dock deemed unsafe can trigger a temporary red tag on the dwelling until a reinspection. I'm issuing that now." He pulled out a large, bright red sticker and slapped it onto my front door. "This property is posted as unsafe for human habitation until the violations are corrected and a full reinspection is completed." George let out a low whistle. "You're condemning his whole house because of one bolt you think is loose?" Peterson puffed out his chest. "Rules are rules. He'll have to hire a licensed contractor, submit a repair plan to the county, get it approved, have the work done, and then schedule a reinspection. It could take months. Months. He was trying to make me homeless, to force me out of my own house over a phantom violation. This was Cynthia's retaliation, pure and simple. She couldn't silence me, so she was trying to evict me. I looked at the red tag on my door. It felt like a physical blow. This cabin was my sanctuary, the one place on earth I could truly rest. And they were trying to take it from me. A cold, hard anger, the kind I rarely felt, began to build inside me. This had gone beyond a simple dispute. This was a declaration of war. After Peterson left, his county car kicking up gravel as he sped away, I called Deputy Ramirez. I explained what had happened. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Peterson," she said finally. "He's on Cynthia's list of preferred vendors. We've had complaints about him before extorting homeowners for unnecessary repairs, but we've never been able to make anything stick. He's part of her crew," I said. "It's another arm of the same monster. And now she's using it against you," Ramirez finished. "She's escalating. She knows we're onto her, so she's trying to get you out of the picture before we can build a case." We were in a difficult position. We had the bug, the van, and the 2 hired hands. But the connection to Cynthia was still circumstantial. The work orders could be explained away. Her outburst at the meeting was damning, but not illegal. We needed more. We needed to catch her in the act of directing her criminal enterprise. We needed to bait a trap. "She thinks I'm out of the house now," I said, an idea starting to form. "She thinks she's won." "What are you thinking, Nate?" Ramirez asked. "She used a fake detector to get into my house," I said. "Let's use a real one to get back at her." The plan was simple, but it felt right. We would use her own tactics against her. I would make a very public show of buying and installing a new, top-of-the-line smart security system. One with smoke detectors, carbon monoxide sensors, and cameras. I'd tell George, knowing he was the community's most reliable source of gossip. The news would get back to Cynthia within hours. She wouldn't be able to resist the temptation. She would know she couldn't have me listening or recording inside a red-tagged house. She would have to send her crew back and to find my new system, to disable it, or even better, replace my new smart detector with another one of her bugs. "She'll send them back?" I said to Ramirez. "She'll have to. She can't risk me having my own surveillance." "And when she does," Ramirez replied, her voice hardening with resolve, "we'll be waiting for them." The red tag on my door was an insult, a weapon meant to drive me away. But Cynthia had made a critical mistake. She thought she was dealing with a quiet doctor who would back down. She didn't know that my entire career had been about working under pressure, about finding solutions in the middle of chaos. She had just red-tagged the wrong house. And in doing so, she'd given us the perfect bait for our trap. The trap needed to be perfect. Cynthia was arrogant, but she wasn't stupid. Her people would be cautious. We had to make the bait irresistible. The first step was theater. I drove into town and went to the big hardware store. I made a point of asking the clerk in the electronics aisle loud, detailed questions about the best wireless security systems. I bought the biggest, most expensive box they had, one with a picture of a smiling, safe family on the front. I paid in cash and made sure to get a talkative cashier who I knew from the local diner. The second step was setting the stage. George helped me. He accidentally let it slip to the neighborhood's biggest gossip that I was installing a fancy new camera system that records everything to the cloud. He added a little flourish, telling her I'd said something about making sure there's a record if any other crooked inspectors show up. The message was clear. I was documenting everything. That evening, under the cover of darkness, Ramirez and her team arrived. The red tag didn't apply to them. The judge's warrant covered the install. The box I bought from the store sat on my kitchen table, unopened. The real equipment was in a discreet black case she carried. It wasn't a commercial security system. It was law enforcement-grade surveillance gear. We chose a smart smoke detector as the decoy, just as planned. It was a perfect shell. From the outside, it looked like any other detector, but inside, instead of a smoke sensor, it housed a high-resolution, wide-angle camera with night vision and a sensitive audio recorder. We installed it in the main hallway, right where the old, non-functional detector had been. It had a perfect view of the front door, the living room, and the hallway where the attic access was. Ramirez's tech guys synced it to a secure network. They could watch and listen in real time from a surveillance van parked a few roads over. With the trap set, I had to leave. The red tag on the door meant I couldn't legally stay there. I packed a small overnight bag and went to stay with George. It was the hardest part, leaving my home, knowing that strangers were going to break into it again. But it was necessary. We waited. The first day passed with no activity. The second day was the same. I started to worry that she wouldn't take the bait. Maybe I had overestimated her arrogance. Maybe her lawyer had finally talked some sense into her. I spent the time helping George fix a leaky faucet and listening to his stories about his years as a ranger. It was a welcome distraction, but the tension was a constant low hum in the back of my mind. On the evening of the third day, it happened. I was sitting on George's porch when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ramirez, "Showtime." My heart started pounding. I looked across the dark water toward my cabin. All the lights were off. It looked empty, quiet, but I knew it wasn't. From George's porch, we had a clear, if distant, view of my driveway. A few minutes later, a dark sedan, not the white van, pulled in without its headlights on. Two figures got out. They were dressed in black and moved with a quiet efficiency that the first two men had lacked. This was a different crew, more professional, more expensive. "She's escalating," I murmured. Inside the surveillance van, Ramirez and her team were watching the live feed from the decoy detector. I had the audio feed patched through to an earpiece. I heard the faint click of my front door lock being picked, then the sound of the door creaking open. Two voices, hushed and professional. "Okay, we're in," the first voice said. "Sweep for RF signals." He bought the Safe Home 3000 kit. The main panel should be in the living room. Find it, disable it, and get out. "What about the detector?" the second voice asked. "Boss wants it swapped. She wants our eyes in here, not his." I heard them moving through the house. The sounds were magnified in my ear. The soft tread of their boots on the wood floor, the rustle of their clothing. Then, a new sound. A metallic click. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness on the video feed Ramirez was watching on her monitor. I could only listen. "Here it is," the first voice said. "The new smoke detector. Right where the intel said it would be. Give me a boost." There was a grunt, and then I heard the sound of the decoy detector being twisted from its base. The audio feed from my earpiece went silent for a heart-stopping second, then sputtered back to life as the device was jostled. They had it in their hands. "Got it," the voice said. "It's the right model. Get the replacement." That was the signal. "Now," Ramirez said into her radio. Her team had, under the warrant, tied a remote relay into my floodlight circuit earlier that day. The cabin's exterior floodlights snapped on, bathing the entire property in brilliant white light. At the same time, two sheriff's cruisers that had been hidden down the road screeched into the driveway, their headlights pinning the dark sedan. Officers poured out, weapons drawn. "Sheriff's Department, you are under arrest." The signed warrant named my address and the crew by description. I heard a crash from inside the house, the sound of my living room window breaking. One of the men was trying to make a run for it, but Ramirez had anticipated that. Two more officers were waiting at the back of the cabin. There was a brief scuffle, a shout, and then the satisfying sound of handcuffs clicking shut. It was over. The trap had worked. Ramirez's voice came through my earpiece, calm and professional. "We have them, Nate. Both of them. And we have the bug they were trying to plant." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. We had them. We had the whole crew. And as the officers were leading the two men in black to a patrol car, one of them, a man who looked like he had a lot to lose, looked directly at Deputy Ramirez and said the magic words. I want to make a deal. I can give you the person who hired us. Her name is Cynthia Hayes. The news of the arrest spread through the Pine Lake community like wildfire. This time there were no rumors, no whispers. There was a busted window on my cabin, yellow police tape across my driveway, and two professional burglars in custody who were singing like canaries. The name on their lips was Cynthia Hayes. The entire dynamic of the community shifted overnight. The fear that Cynthia had cultivated for so long curdled into anger. Her power had always been based on the illusion of control and the implied threat of retaliation. Now, with her crew in jail and the police building a rock-solid case, the illusion was shattered. I expected Cynthia to lawyer up and disappear. I was wrong. Her ego, it turned out, was even bigger than her criminal ambition. She panicked. That evening, as the sun was setting over the lake, casting long shadows through the pines, George and I were on his porch, watching the light change on the water. We saw her before we heard her. She was marching down to her dock, a large briefcase in one hand. She was wearing heels, which was a terrible choice for the wet, mossy planks of a dock. Her boat, a sleek and powerful speedboat, was tied up at the end. She was making a run for it. Well, I'll be, George said, lowering his binoculars. The queen is abandoning her castle. She was frantic, throwing off the ropes that tied her boat to the dock. She tossed the briefcase into the boat and then tried to climb in after it. That's when it happened. Her heels slipped on a patch of wet wood. Her arms flailed, reaching for something to grab onto. But there was nothing. She went down hard. There was a sickening crack as her arm hit the sharp edge of the dock, followed by a loud splash as she tumbled into the cold, dark water. For a second, there was silence. Then, a choked gasp. She surfaced, sputtering, her face a mask of shock and pain. Her left arm was bent at an unnatural angle. I didn't think. I reacted. The years of training, the instinct drilled into me in emergency rooms and field hospitals, took over. She wasn't Cynthia Hayes, the antagonist, the criminal. She was a patient, a person in distress. Call 911. I yelled at George as I took off at a dead sprint toward her dock. I hit the wooden planks at full speed, my boots skidding but holding. I jumped into the waist-deep water. It was shockingly cold, stealing my breath. Cynthia was struggling, her good arm flailing weakly, her head starting to slip under the surface. The shock and the cold were overwhelming her. I reached her, sliding one arm under her back and the other under her knees. I've got you, I said, my voice calm and steady, the voice I used with frightened patience. Just try to relax. I'm going to get you out of the water. I half lifted, half dragged her onto the dock. She was shivering violently, her lips turning blue. Hypothermia was setting in fast. Her left arm was clearly broken, a compound fracture with bone visible through the skin. She had a nasty gash on her forehead that was bleeding freely. First things first, airway, breathing, circulation. The ABCs. Her breathing was shallow but steady. I took off my jacket and wrapped it around her, trying to preserve her body heat. I used a clean cloth to apply direct pressure to the cut on her head. An ambulance is on the way, Cynthia, I said, keeping my voice even. You have a broken arm and a head injury. I need you to stay as still as possible. Her eyes fluttered open. They were glassy with shock, unfocused. She looked at me, but I don't think she really saw me. She saw a person in authority, a doctor. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing, and her mind was grabbing for a lifeline. My lawyer, she whispered, her teeth chattering. I need to talk to my lawyer. We'll call him from the hospital, I said soothingly. But she wasn't listening. The words started tumbling out, a panicked, whispered confession. Shock made her talk like I was on her side. The words just spilled. I signed the checks, she mumbled, her voice slurring. I had to protect the community, the property values. I hired them, all of them. The inspectors, the security team, it was just business. I didn't react. I just kept pressure on the wound, kept her warm, and kept talking to her in that same calm, reassuring voice. I could hear the sirens in the distance, getting closer. A moment later, Deputy Ramirez arrived, her patrol car skidding to a halt. She ran down to the dock, her medical kit in hand. Her body camera was on, its small green light glowing steadily. She knelt beside me. What happened? She slipped, I said. Compound fracture of the humerus, head lac, starting to show signs of hypothermia. Ramirez took in the scene, her professional gaze missing nothing. And all the while, Cynthia kept whispering, her confession spilling out in broken fragments, a desperate attempt to justify her actions to a phantom lawyer. The bugs were just for insurance had to know who was weak. The red tags were just a tool. I signed all the orders. Every word was being captured by the microphone on Ramirez's uniform. Every self-incriminating syllable was being recorded in high-definition video and audio. I was focused on keeping her alive, on honoring the oath I took to help anyone in need, no matter who they were. But in a strange twist of fate, by saving her life, I was also sealing her fate. The final, undeniable piece of evidence wasn't found in a van or on a computer. It came from the mouth of the architect herself, delivered in a state of shock and fear to the very man she had tried to destroy. The final HOA meeting was held 2 weeks later. It wasn't in the small community hall. It was in the high school auditorium, the only place big enough to hold everyone who wanted to be there. The atmosphere was nothing like the tense, fearful silence of the meetings Cynthia used to run. This time, the room buzzed with energy, with a sense of purpose. The old board had resigned in disgrace. A new interim board, led by George, was running the show. The red tag was gone from my door. The window was replaced. My cabin was quiet again. But this wasn't about me anymore. It was about the whole community. Deputy Ramirez stood at the podium, not as a resident, but as an officer of the law. She laid out the entire case methodically, piece by piece. She played the door cam video of the first man breaking into my house. She showed photographs of the contents of the van, the master keys, the forged work orders, the stockpile of listening devices. She detailed the confessions of the men who had been arrested, the professional burglars who had been hired to swap out my security cameras. They had laid out the whole scheme, how they were paid by a shell corporation that was funded by another shell corporation, all leading back to a single bank account controlled by Cynthia Hayes. Then, Ramirez looked out at the silent, packed auditorium. Cynthia Hayes built her enterprise on the idea that you were all too scared, too busy, or too disconnected to notice what she was doing, she said. She preyed on your trust. She used your desire for a safe community as a weapon against you. Finally, she dimmed the lights. A large screen descended behind her. The most compelling evidence, however, came from Ms. Hayes herself. She played the body camera footage from the night on the dock. The screen showed my hands working to stabilize Cynthia's arm, to stop the bleeding. It showed the flashing lights of the ambulance reflecting on the dark water. And it captured her voice, a panicked, slurring whisper, confessing to everything. I signed the checks. I hired them. It was just business. The auditorium was utterly silent. You could hear a pin drop. The sight and sound of her confession, while I was actively working to save her life, was a powerful, gut-wrenching moment. It was the ultimate betrayal laid bare for everyone to see. When the lights came up, Ramirez concluded, Cynthia Hayes has been charged with multiple felonies, including conspiracy, wire fraud, burglary, and illegal wiretapping. Mr. Peterson, the county inspector, has also been arrested and is cooperating with the investigation. The assets of Hayes Secure Homes and the Pine Lake Safety Initiative have been frozen. A full forensic audit of the HOA's finances is underway. A wave of applause, of pure, unadulterated relief, swept through the auditorium. People were standing, cheering. They weren't cheering for Cynthia's downfall. They were cheering for the return of their community. They were cheering because the bully was gone. I didn't stand or cheer. I just sat in the back, watching. For me, it wasn't a moment of triumph. It was a moment of closure. The fight was over. The question that had been nagging at me, how far will a man go to defend his own, had been answered. I hadn't thrown a single punch in anger. I had used my mind, my training, my precision. I defended my home by observing, by planning, and in the end, by healing. After the meeting, people came up to me, shaking my hand, thanking me. They saw me as some kind of hero. But I didn't feel like one. I just felt like a man who had wanted to be left alone and had been pushed too far. George clapped me on the shoulder. Well, Nate, he said, a broad smile on his face. Looks like the neighborhood watch has a new chairman. I shook my head. No thanks, George. I think I'm officially retired from community organizing. I'm just going to stick to medicine. The legal system would handle the rest. The courts would decide Cynthia's fate. The auditors would untangle her financial web. My part was done. All I had wanted was my quiet little corner of the world back. And now it finally was. The battle for Pine Lake was over. Not with a bang, but with the quiet, methodical presentation of the truth. And for the first time in a long time, The future of this place felt safe, not because of a fake initiative, but because the people in it were finally working together. A few months later, summer has settled over Pine Lake. Mornings are glass still. Loons call. The spring chaos feels far away. The HOA is different now. George took the president job with a grumble and kept it. Meetings are short. Rules are simple. The budget is open. Forensic auditors mapped the whole scheme. Years of pressure, shell companies, families pushed out, quick flips for profit. A class action suit is moving to help them. Cynthia took a plea. With the evidence stacked high, she pled to fraud and wiretapping. She's serving time in a low-security federal prison. Around the lake, her name is rarely said, like a bad storm that passed. My brother, Ethan, visited last weekend. We sat on my fixed dock, inspected by someone honest, rods in hand, not catching much. He'd tracked it all through my calls and texts. I didn't think you had it in you, he said. I always pictured you as the guy who'd just move. I did too, I said. But there's a line between avoiding a fight and letting someone shove you off your own land. The "don't mess with my quiet" button, he joked. Something like that. I've seen life and death in the OR and in war zones. That was always in other people's homes. This was mine. When someone came for it, I used what I had. Not rage, not a gun, but precision, patience, a plan, and when the moment came, a steady hand for the person who tried to break me. I didn't want the fight, but when it came, I finished it. Now, the quiet is back. It feels earned. I sit on my porch with coffee and watch the mist lift off the water. The world is still loud out there. I'll go back to it soon enough. For now, here, things are simple. Neighbors wave. The board posts the books. The dock bolts are tight. The lake is calm. Everything is right.